Welcome to Down to Dunk. I'm your host, Andrew Schlecht. We're part of the Athletic Podcast Network. With me today is my good friend, Alex Speers. Alex, what's up?
Good morning.
Oh, good morning. I want to remind you guys to go to theathletic.com/down to dunk to get The Athletic for $3.99 a month. You can get this podcast ad-free. You can get all the great podcasts ad-free with a subscription to The Athletic, plus all the great writing that's done at The Athletic. So you got to go do it. Do it today. $3.99 a month. That's just too cheap. Way too cheap. Today we're going to talk about the Thunder and the Rockets. The Thunder without SGA. Poku and Ty Jerome going to the bubble. And then we'll finish up with, can SGA become an all-star? So we'll start with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to miss the game tonight. He has a left knee sprain. He injured it in the middle of the Rockets game, which was kind of a weird moment because Shai clearly went down, got up, and was limping. He limped for probably 2 possessions, and Degnault pulled him. And Shai was pretty peeved about being pulled out of the game. And he went to his seat for maybe 5 seconds and then got back up and then went back in the game. It was a very just odd moment during the game. And then played the rest of the game, but I guess he actually was injured. And to be clear, like after the game, Shai was asked about the situation. Shai was like, yeah, he's just looking out for me. So there's not like any like beef between Shai and Coach Mark. But yeah, it's without Shai and without George Hill, who will miss at least 4 weeks. He'll be reevaluated in 4 weeks. Tonight, I mean, Monday was rough. Monday was a rough game. Tonight could be really rough. It should be rough.
So we've got George Hill out for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then Shai is day to day. I mean, it didn't sound like they didn't say like, oh, he's going to be out at least a week or something.
No, I mean, this is just on the NBA puts out an injury report like 3 times a day. And I was just checking it to see. And Shai was listed as out.
And then Poku's out.
Poku's gone.
Defensive players.
Yeah.
Gone forever.
Gone for good.
And so Melon is going to get to do. He's going to get to lead the team. Congrats to him.
Don't you think Hami will start?
What? Oh, not over Teo, but you mean with Teo?
With him.
yeah, but Teo is the lead ball handler.
Is he?
Yes, please. Come on.
Is he?
If Hami's going to be bringing up the ball, it is going to be a long night. I think the fun thing about tonight, until it's not fun and none of us are paying attention to the game halfway through, would be that Teo's going to get to run the starter offense, which kind of doesn't exist, but still getting to play against the other team's starters. I think that will be a good experience. It'll be something to watch.
Yeah. He'll pass Al Horford some.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, that Houston game was brutal. I mean, remember at the beginning of the year, I posted a few tweets, and I was saying that one of the things that suggests this team is playing a little bit over their heads is that the 3-point percentage of their opponents is super bad right now. Opponents were shooting something like 33%. That was top 5, I guess you would say, in the league in terms of OKC being lucky. Well, that has completely changed over the past couple games, and especially with that game against the Rockets where I think they shot over 50% from 3. They are now at 16th in that ranking.
Yeah.
So they are now neither lucky or unlucky. Everything has normalized. And that was one of the things that was going to change, that was going to like shift this season. It just all happened in one game. It felt like it happened in one quarter.
It just all happened at once. It was, and it felt like it. Like you could feel it, like amongst the team. And the Rockets were honestly kind of a joy to watch because I hadn't heard all season a team cheer for one another like the Rockets did.
Well, and that was what I don't know if I would say worried about, but going into that game, I knew it was going to be different from the other games we had played because I do feel like there is a component to the season where other teams maybe are underestimating the Thunder, and or maybe like playing down to them, not bringing their A game.
Yeah,
Whereas
definitely.
like Houston has a roster full of guys who are miffed and peeved right now.
All of them. Yeah, they all have something to prove. Like Christian Wood was cut several times in his career, and he's trying to prove that he's even an all-star type of guy. I mean, you'll hear his name amongst like all-star candidates.
Yeah, and then of course John Wall coming back
John
from
Wall.
a year and a half.
Boogie.
Then Boogie, like Eric Gordon, who everyone said was washed up last year. Like it's just the entire roster is just like hungry and wants to destroy everyone and prove everyone wrong.
Daniel House getting kicked out of the bubble.
It was a bad recipe, in other words, for the Thunder, because this wasn't like Houston teams of past where maybe you could like catch them on a night where James Harden is just messing around and no one really cares.
Right. Yeah, it was something else. And the first quarter, although the Thunder got killed, it was really astonishing to watch a team go 11 of 13 in the quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just crazy. It was honestly, it like brought me to actual laughter when those shots toward the end of the quarter just kept going down. Because you kind of, when shots start falling, it's like a typical NBA rhythm for them to just stop. I mean, that's just the way that it typically goes. And you'll have these rare nights where that happened with Houston. It happened with Fred VanVleet last night, where his shot you just thought, okay, like that's cool. Like Fred's had a really nice start to the game, and it just never got turned off. And that happens, and it happened against Houston. The Thunder the Thunder tried hard, they battled, but I think you could also, and Barry Trammell had brought this up in the post game, that he asked if defense can slump, and Mark Decknall was like, yeah, definitely, and he said you have to look at the tape, but he thought that they weren't competing like they had been. And you could see it.
Yeah.
And some of that could be you see 11 threes go down in one quarter. It's like, all right, let's pack it in, guys.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was just, and the crazy thing was, it wasn't just, it wasn't like a Klay Thompson doing it or a Fred VanVleet. It was the entire team. Every single guy who shot it was shooting amazingly.
It really was.
This was brutal. And then on the flip side, like that was the first game. I mean, there have been other blowouts this season, but that was one of the first games where it really felt like someone has to score the points. Like I wasn't taking away a lot from the Thunder side, especially like after that first quarter.
It was probably the first game where, because they got killed by the Nets, but Teo had his big game.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably the first game of the season where you're like, yeah, there's really nothing there. For the Thunder. Right. Like Bays had a nice game. He wasn't great.
But Bays has scored double digits in 4 straight games, which it feels like he's started to break out of that slump he was in.
Well, it goes with the working theory that Bays and Dort can't have good games on the same night.
Interesting.
So we're right now. Like if you're excited about Bays, what you're sacrificing is Dort. You're sacrificing Dort to the basketball gods right now whenever you cheer for Bays to do well. So just so you know, that's what you're doing.
Well, it's very funny watching like the sports card market, because at the beginning of the season, like Bays' prices were all inflated.
Yeah.
And then when he went through that slump, like now I feel like you can get Baisley rookies for relatively cheap. Like they've gone down a little. Meanwhile, Dort went the opposite way. So I wonder if we'll see Dort prices come down. Because they're pricey, Andrew.
Are they really?
Well, I mean, not like he doesn't have many rookies to begin with, but just, I don't know. People just got excited about him all at the same time.
Yeah. So since the second Clippers game, things have been rough for him. That was the first game that he missed a 3. He was 0-6 in that game, 1 of 4 against Portland, 4 of 8 against Phoenix, which was good, but then 1 of 9 against Brooklyn, and then 1 of 4.
So what's his season percentage at now?
So it's in the
36.
Yeah, it's in the 30s. Hold on. 37.6, which still very good. Very, very good.
If you just keep shooting bad, we'll just keep saying that. Like 33%. Hey, we said at the beginning of the season, if he can shoot
Honestly,
33%.
if we get to 32, I'm still like, still pretty good. I still take it.
Yeah. So tonight should be buckets of fun. We'll get to see a lot of Hami, a lot of all the guys on our bench. Unfortunately, we don't get to see Poku. And I know we had talked about this a little bit, but I'm actually in favor of him going to the GLeague Bubble. And the reason is because, as we all agree, this pick was a home run swing, right? It's not a single, it's not a double. And in the preseason, it looked like a home run swing in the sense that, yes, he was terrible, but he had so much confidence and he was trying to do everything. And then the season started and it felt like, oh man, he's getting to do some things, but he's also just kind of having to slot in as like this ninth man on an NBA roster and just kind of like do normal basketball things. And I really just want to see him do whatever he wants because again, this is a home run swing. He's not, for us to connect on that home run swing, it's not going to be from him just like hanging out in the corner, maybe getting to pass the ball every once in a while. Like I think it's going to be from him getting to develop all these skills that so far it doesn't necessarily look like he has them, but he needs the opportunity. And so maybe he will get that in the G League Bubble, in addition to getting to play against some of these prospects who are actually on his level. You know, like getting to play against a Kuminga or a Jalen Green. Like I think that will be a really good experience as well.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it's a good thing for him. I have questions about it.
I mean, it's great. People are gonna be tuning in when we play that G League Ignite team.
Oh man, yeah,
this is gonna be a blast.
Two people. I mean, I'll be live tweeting that game. I mean, 100%. It's gonna be.
You should try to get in the G League Bubble, Andrew. Is it? It's in Orlando, right?
I believe it is. Yeah. I mean, I don't.
You're a big Disney guy.
That'd be great. Actually, that would be wonderful. I would love to go. I don't. Are media going to this?
Well, I don't know. Somebody has to go.
Do they? I don't know. So the coach of the Blue talked to the media yesterday. His name is Grant Gibbs, and he was asked about Poku, and he said he thought that this was kind of the plan all along for him. So, which I don't know. I hadn't really gotten that impression and was a little bit surprised. And a lot of people I talked to, just media-wise, were surprised too that he ended up going just because he's playing. Like if he wasn't playing at all, you know, if they were treating him like he was Bruno, like the Raptors did with Bruno, where they just basically didn't play him, then yeah, you have to send him. You have to. But you're playing 20 minutes a night in the league. I was a little surprised. I was a little bit surprised. And I have concerns that he's far away from being like a legit contributor. Because I'm not sure that Poku really plays on hardly any other teams in the league. So he's pretty far away from being a contributor. I am. If he plays in the NBA, it's okay if he doesn't look good, right? If he goes to the G League and doesn't look good, then I feel like people are going to be closer to pushing the panic button on him.
I don't feel that way just because he's the youngest player in the league. Like I don't really care what happens this year or even next year.
I'm glad. I think that's the right approach. I think that's the correct approach with this. I'm just saying, if Poku doesn't look good, it's going to be an interesting ride for some Thunder fans.
I mean, he hasn't looked good already.
I know. And that's what I'm saying. I know.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's the G League. Like, I just don't think there will be a ton of eyes on it. It'll be a good experience.
On national television.
Yeah, but I mean, who's watching other than when someone plays the G League Ignite?
I don't know.
Like those are the only games.
People will watch the Ignite games, though.
Yeah. No, I'm going to be watching those.
Yeah,
I'm just not worried. This is
okay.
Everyone just needs to take a break with Poku. We're sending him off to school. You know, he's going to boarding school. He's going to be there for a little while. He's going to be learning a lot of things, and he's going to come back. It'll be great.
Well, and they did consider sending Maladon and Isaiah Roby to the bubble as well, and decided to keep them.
And they realized they would have no players on their team.
If they didn't have Maladon tonight,
it'd be Hami all day.
It'd be Hami time, 48 minutes of Hami time, which I might sign up for, actually, now that I'm saying it out loud. I think it might be quite enjoyable. Let's go to the stream. We have Fluky from Germany. We have Miguel de Vela from the Philippines. We have Yoni from Tel Aviv. We have Brian from Madison, Wisconsin. We have the Diabetic from Hydro, Oklahoma.
Hey.
We got Pat Scott here in OKC. Robert Hancock in Dallas, Texas. We have Adam Brandt from Pennsylvania. Man, down to dunk worldwide. Joseph Detterman from Kingsville, Texas. We have Ben DeHover from Hawaii. Wow, this is great. This is wonderful.
It's really early in Hawaii, right?
Hey, he heard about the stream, had to be on.
Wow.
DTD worldwide.
Wow.
Worldwide. So the Thunder play the Rockets tonight. Without Shai, it should be quite an experience. So tune in. We'll all be watching, seeing maybe we can get a big Teo game, because there is something about Poku and Teo. They both kind of have these attributes. Like, they're not scared. They don't seem to be rattled or scared of anything. So I'm excited to see what he can do with the opportunity. Ty Jerome also going to the bubble. I assume he's going to play. Haven't seen him play basketball, but hopefully he gets to participate in some of these G League games. And with that, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the All-Star team. And we're back from that break. Alex, let's talk about this All-Star game, which actually is going to happen March 7th. I don't know who's asking for it. I don't know who's pushing at this, but they're going to have a game. Shout out to Parker from Denver as well. So, and T Trope from Miami. Wow. And somebody's name I can't pronounce, from Iceland. Longtime listener in Iceland. There aren't that many people in Iceland, Alex.
I've been to Iceland.
I know you have, yeah.
It's a beautiful country. Beautiful country.
Wow. I wonder if you know my friend Hafthor, who's from Iceland, who I went to college with. Let me know.
Oh, really?
In the chat. So let's talk about locks for this game, Alex. Who in the Western Conference do you have as a lock?
Yeah, because there's two questions. One is, will Shai make the All-Star team? And the other question is, does he deserve to make the All-Star team? And I think it's much easier to answer the question of, will he make the All-Star team? Because you start going through these names. Looking at last year's voting, this would be my guess for the starters. I think it's going to be Luka, Steph Curry, Kawhi, LeBron, and Anthony Davis. And if you're saying, why is Jokic not on there? Go look at last year's voting. Jokic had half the amount of votes as Kawhi did. Like, I think because Kawhi's in LA, and same with LeBron and Davis, like, they're just going to get those votes. In fact, I would almost say that Zion has a better chance to make these starters than Nikola Jokic. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
That is so sad.
It is, but and I don't think that's going to happen, but like, that would not surprise me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only way Zion gets on this team.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I don't know. I'll talk about that.
I don't know, man. So, I don't know. I think the league would like to have Zion in the game.
I know. Yeah. That's what I was about to say. Like, this is the same league that basically created this play-in scenario last year to try to get Zion into the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they really not going to tell Frank Vogel, like, hey, could you please select Zion?
Yeah. Think about
really
Zion.
Help us out.
Just give him send him a text that just says, think about Zion Williamson. Nothing else. Not suggesting it's about the All-Star game, but just saying, think about him.
Right. So those five, let's leave out Zion for now. So those five, Jokic obviously is a lock for the bench.
Yeah.
Damian Lillard is a lock.
Dame is a lock.
Paul George, I think, is an absolute lock for the bench.
Yeah.
And then I have not named one Jazz player, and I promise you they are going to take at least two Jazz players.
Yes. Mitchell and Gobert, I've got them locked in. Lock them in. They're on the bench.
So they're locked in. So if just that happens, you have 2 spots left. We already talked about Zion,
I
who
think you
could be
got
one of those.
I think you almost have to lock him in, just because of the spectacle that he is.
I honestly agree, but I don't think people have realized that yet, because like no one's really talking about Zion that much this year, even though he's on TV. Because his team is so like disgusting to watch most nights.
They are. Yeah.
So if we agree that now there's only 1 spot left.
One spot.
One
Good
spot.
players left.
And the players I had, Brandon Ingram, which if Zion gets in, Brandon Ingram probably not getting in.
Yeah.
Christian Wood, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Shai, Mike Conley, and Ja. Now, Ja has only played 7 games. I just wanted to say him because if he had played a full season, like I absolutely think he'd be right there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think like De'Aaron Fox is in this conversation.
No.
So for me, it's just so obvious that Shai's not going to get in because they are going to take a Phoenix Sun, whoever it is.
Yeah, it'll be Booker, I think.
And it probably should be Chris Paul, to be honest. But because I think if you compare Shai to Booker, like Shai is having a much better season than Booker.
Yeah. I think Booker's still trying to figure things out.
But yes, they're absolutely going to take a Phoenix Sun, and it'll probably be Devin Booker.
Yeah.
Just because he's more popular. I mean, Devin Booker did really well in the voting last year. So he's like a fan favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it's like there's zero chance that Shai's getting into the All-Star game. Especially now. Like I would have said this even before we found out he was going to miss the game.
Mm-hmm.
But if he misses any significant amount of time, obviously it's done. But even if he comes back the next game, the only way I can see him getting in is with injuries to other players, or if players back out because they don't want to go to the All-Star bubble, whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say there's not zero chance, but it is not looking good. It is not looking good at all for him, which is kind of a bummer because he has played really well, and he's of all the guys that you're talking about being on the bubble for that last spot or those last 2 spots, he's like the most efficient player out of all of them.
So that gets into the second question: is should Shai be an All-Star?
Yeah,
and the thing that I think makes that question a lot more interesting this year is that the Western Conference is so mediocre beyond that top 4.
Yep.
So, like, the team records really shouldn't be playing that much of a factor outside of those top 4 teams.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's the case, I think you can make a very good argument that Shai should be in, comparing him to guys like Mike Conley, Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Donovan Mitchell, and then Ja. As we mentioned, like the Jazz are 15-5. They're going to get 2 guys in. But if you leave that out for a second, like SGA absolutely competes with all of these guys. And I sent you an Excel file where I just went to Basketball Reference, took all the big stat categories, points, rebounds, free throws, assist percentage, usage, win shares, 3-point attempt rate, true shooting, and I color coded it. And just going across, the only one when you're comparing Shai to these other guys that Shai is like quote unquote bad in is his free throw percentage. Mm-hmm. Everything else, he's middle of the pack or top of the pack.
Yeah, and it's like not. And his free throw percentage is like 76%, which isn't bad.
Right. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not terrible.
Yeah,
like he is the best of these guys at getting to the line, which I think is really impressive.
Yeah.
Even though he's on a team that is under 500, he is 3rd in win shares behind only Mike Conley and Chris Paul. He has the highest true shooting.
Yep.
Like he is a very worthy candidate, and he's the type of candidate that typical like NBA smart guys would love, because the case for Shai is almost a statistical case. Like in years past when we'd be arguing for Russ to get in, it's like, how would you not have Russell Westbrook? Like, it's Russell Westbrook. He's an all-star. Like, he just is.
Yeah.
Like, we weren't even like trying to make like a good statistical case, because it's just Russ. Like, you just put Russ in.
You didn't have to. Yeah.
And now with Shai, it's like flipped, where like we're having to like drill down into all these statistical categories because his statistical case is really good. And I think there will be people, and who knows, maybe it's like Zach Lowe or Danny and Nate, who are going to be making the case for Shai, because the case is there.
Yeah, I don't think that it's hard to make a case today. However, like voting ends, I think on the 16th of February. And they will likely lose tonight without Shai because the team identity just is gone. I just don't know who scores the points. And then I don't know if he plays against Minnesota, and Karl Anthony Towns is likely to play in at least one of these games this weekend. And
Right.
he could, like, not only the Thunder, but Shai could lose some serious momentum by the end of next week. Because if they don't get more than 2 wins out of this Houston, Minnesota homestand, like that's bad. Like that's not good for the Thunder. And then they have Lakers, Denver, Milwaukee, Portland, Milwaukee. And like that's tough. Like that's really tough. I guess that last Milwaukee game will be after the voting has been done. But still, like that's Lakers, Denver, Milwaukee, Portland. Like they maybe get one of those.
Yeah, especially if we know George Hill's going to be out.
George Hill will certainly be out. Just that could kill some momentum that he has gained in this first half of the season. I think if you stop today and voting ended today, he should definitely be an all-star. I think that in this Western Conference, he has been better than Devin Booker, Chris Paul. You can argue that he's been better than Donovan Mitchell, although Mitchell's been on a much better team. John Morant, just because he's played more games, I could argue that he's more deserving than Zion. So you could definitely I think you're right. You can make the case that he should be on the team. I'm with you. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that wins do matter. And once you get past that Denver game, I think that it's going to be harder to make the case for him to
right. Because if that's what happens, like if they lose the majority of this next stretch, people will basically be able to just write it off and say, well, yeah, he's playing great, but he's on a really bad team.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't go any further than that. Like, I'm sure I'm going to hear that on podcasts. Like, oh, yeah, he's having a nice season, but it's a bad team, so who cares? But when you actually look at the stats, like, this is not a, like, good stats, bad team guy at all.
No.
Because usually what that looks like is super inefficient, and meanwhile, SGA is one of the most efficient of all of these guards.
He's only taking 14 shots a game.
and scoring basically the same amount of points as Booker and Mitchell. Like Booker and Mitchell are both under 23 points per game, and Shai is at 21.8. Like he's right there.
Yeah. Yeah, you could. He's really close to on their level as players, which is kind of crazy because he's a couple years
that actually
those guys.
Like doing this exercise made me start to question, like, okay, I can start a team and I can have one of these 3 guards. Who am I taking? Shai, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell.
Who would you take?
So the only thing. So 3-point shooting is a big thing.
It's a big
Mitchell is taking 8 threes per game, 8.6 threes per game, shooting 39%, which is absurd.
That is nuts.
Devin Booker is taking 6.2 threes per game, shooting 36%. And then Shai is down at 4.6 attempts. That's a big differentiator between those guys. The other big differentiator for me is that we still haven't seen Shai show the ability to just go out and drop 40 on a night.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously Devin Booker scored 70 points in a game, and Donovan Mitchell was insane in the bubble playoffs.
Yeah.
So for those reasons, I totally understand people taking Booker and Donovan Mitchell. But again, those guys are 2 years older. And I've already seen such a big jump from Shai this year. And he is the type of guy who is always going to look better when you look at the stats. Like that fact that he is that high in win shares, I thought really stuck out to me. Because if you look across these guys and at their win shares, like it's not surprising that Chris Paul and Mike Conley, 2 guys who we have always talked about as like, these are just winning players that you have on your team. Like they're high in win share. Meanwhile, like Devin Booker's win shares are like very low in comparison. So I think you can make the argument that to create a winning team, you might take Shai, but it comes with an acknowledgement that you really need like a higher wattage star next to him,
Mm-hmm.
unless he can develop into that.
Yeah, I think I think it's totally possible. I think that's within him. He really does defer to his teammates a lot, which I think is ultimately a good thing for this team, and maybe not the best thing for his career overall, because we've seen like Westbrook didn't defer to anybody and he became the MVP. I mean, it was that can be a great thing for your career to not defer. It's been a really good thing for Trae Young. Trae Young didn't defer to anybody.
That's why I don't want Poku to defer to anyone. That's why I want him to go to the bubble. Poku's the man. Let him do whatever he wants.
Oh, Poku. This is year 6 for Devin Booker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, it's. I think I would probably take Devin Booker, but he's had 3 more years than Shai in the league.
Yeah,
that's a lot of time. Like that's a lot of minutes. That's a lot of reps. That's a lot of time to kind of figure out who you are as a player. It's crazy that he's in year 6 and he's only 24 years old. That is just so wild. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it. At the beginning of the season, I would have said you're crazy if you don't take Booker or Mitchell. But I think that he has made the case, and not only in the scoring category, but as a passer and as an efficient pick and roll player, he's been tops in the league. Like he's been a much better pick and roll ball handler than Mitchell has. I mean, it's really not close at all. The caliber of player that he's been, and McKelly and I talked about that on Monday. So, I would probably even take Shai, 1, because he's still on his rookie scale deal, and 2, I think that it's easier to build like a really good team around him as long as you can get top picks in the draft.
Yeah. So I mean, that is one of the nicest things about Shai. Now the people who would argue for Mitchell and Booker would say like the player you're describing or I'm about to describe are those guys. But the nice thing about Shai is that you could bring in a high-powered scorer guard, and it would be fine. Like he could play with Devin Booker. He could play with Donovan Mitchell.
No doubt.
And I think that's really nice for their flexibility going forward, because they're never going to get in a scenario like the Kings were, where they're like, well, we have De'Aaron Fox. Do we really want another ball handler and Luka Doncic? And I don't think the Thunder would ever do that regardless, but like make that type of a decision. But Shai just makes everything so much easier because we've already seen it. He's played with 2 point guards at the same time, and he excelled.
Yeah, I think that he's a point guard. I had questions about that prior to the season as well. Like what?
And it seems like he wants to be a point guard.
Without a doubt, wants to be. He very much wants to be the leader of this team. He hates losing. He wants to win every game he can. He takes it personally, which he should, and that's good. Like those are good qualities, and it's going to be a tough end of the season for him. And people are going to start questioning stuff about him. We talked about this even before the season started. We talked about like we can write the storylines before they even happen. Like somebody is going to write something in April or whatever. Like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, we've heard from blah 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 that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's unhappy. And honestly, if you're a Thunder fan, like you should be excited about that, because that means like he wants to win desperately, and the Thunder do as well. Like that's not out of alignment with what the Thunder want. The Thunder, yes, they're going to lose games, but they're doing it because they want to ultimately win. We've talked about this all the time. I don't need to keep going over it, but it's a storyline that could happen because he was like visibly upset after that Rockets game. And I don't know if some of it was his injury or what, but he was visibly upset after the game. And it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. And also, like, I wouldn't start worrying. I wouldn't worry about him because they're going to throw a max contract extension at him, and he'll slap that smile right back on his face. I mean, that's how this happens. I mean, the Kings have always gotten those guys to sign their second deal. It just doesn't happen where people forego that max extension. It just doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah, no, I am so much higher on Shea's ceiling than I was at the beginning of the season.
Mhm.
And I think it's mostly because he's just been allowed to show us who he is as a player and who he wants to be as a player. And that all gets me really excited. I think we all knew he was a winning player. He
Mhm.
is the type of guy who is going to lead to winning basketball. But to do it in the way he's doing it as that lead ball handler is just so exciting. I mean, he had a step back against the Rockets. It didn't even go in, but he got so much space on it. Like
Yeah.
he got so far away from the defender in a couple of moves. And as that continues to develop, along with his ability to draw fouls, like we are looking at a potential hyper efficient superstar.
Yeah. Without a
In
doubt.
fact, we talk about his drives, a lot, and
Mhm.
he's second in drives. And I was looking at the NBA.com stats, and he is second. And I was looking at how many free throw attempts he gets out of those drives. And it was really interesting that he is tied with Luka and Trey. They all generate 3.2 free throw attempts out of their 20 plus drives per night.
Huh.
But obviously, those other two guys get a lot more free throw attempts. I mean, Trey's up like
Oh,
around
yeah.
10 per game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just,
He's
I
crazy.
and I guess it's just the all the other components of their games, their ability to draw fouls on the perimeter is where they're getting all these fouls, or maybe the stats aren't perfect at picking up like what counts as a drive or not.
Mhm. It's
I just
also
thought it was weird that he's tied with them.
yeah, as it also could be the whining that both of those guys do that Shea just doesn't do.
Oh, we should can we talk about that real quick?
Yeah.
So Zach Lowe, quote, Luka has become one of the biggest whiners in the NBA. It's constant. Every
He
time he
said that.
drives, he is whining. He spent so much energy whining to the referees and slumping his shoulders to teammates. It sucked the life out of the team many times.
Did you have this prepared?
Yes. Because I think it's really interesting what's going on with Luka and the media right now and
Yeah.
fans. And I
Yeah.
didn't think it was inevitable because I actually thought the Mavs were going to be really good this year.
Me too.
But this is how it typically goes for the superstars, like for the big time superstars. I mean, we heard conversations, not this kind of conversation, but conversations like this about LeBron early in his career.
Yep.
And I just think it's so interesting because Luka was like odds on MVP favorite going into this season.
I know. We had a question before the season if I would take Luka or the
Luka
field.
the field, yeah.
Glad I took the field. Glad I did it.
Smart man, smart man. But I just thought that was crazy to see something like that. That was like really a turning point in the media narrative about Luka for Zach Lowe to come out and call out his whining.
Dude, if Zach Lowe is saying it, then yeah. And it's apparent. Like you just watch 10 minutes of a Mavs game. You're like, oh, yeah, this is interesting. He's
And
very he's he's
you
very
see a
vocal.
lot more people on Twitter making the connection between, oh, this is actually starting to look a lot like James Harden in Houston, which people talked about last season,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like, wow, he plays a lot like Harden, but I enjoy watching it. Whereas now it's flipped. It's like, oh, this looks like Harden, and oh yeah, I don't like this either. Like the Mavs
Uh-huh.
are not fun to watch right now.
Uh-huh. I know.
And I don't know what they do going forward because obviously they're going to have a max spot this summer, but there's not going to be a ton of free agents. Porzingis is like this huge question mark to the point where that pick this year might actually be relevant for the Knicks, which is
Yeah,
wild.
I mean, the Knicks could have a couple nice picks.
Yeah,
I mean, they could. Right now, the Mavs pick is better than their own pick with regards to odds,
right. Yeah,
which I don't
that's
think that holds. But they're in a similar like OKC situation, where like OKC has the better of Miami and Houston, and you're like,
yeah.
oh, like Miami's 7-13. When does this turn around for them? I think it will. I think it eventually will turn around for them. But it's not looking. It has not looked good. And like Myers Leonard, like you can be like, yeah, Myers Leonard doesn't really matter. He kind of matters to their depth and what they can do in the regular season. I mean, he's a guy that played quite a few minutes last season and is helpful to them as a stretch big and a guy that just flexes like crazy. So it's just
Mm,
it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
yeah, it's wild. And I've actually started wondering because I was looking at Oladipo's stats,
Mm-hmm.
who is someone that everyone I think has just kind of forgotten about
Yeah.
for good reason. I mean, he didn't play for a full year. But his stats are almost identical to where he was pre-injury.
Wow.
The
He
only
was
thing
good.
down,
Super good the other night. Yeah.
yeah, the only thing down is his shooting. He's not shooting it nearly as well from three. But he's like at 31%.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if he keeps playing like this and the Rockets keep winning, which they've won 6 in a row now, and they end up being the fifth seed or whatever, I could easily see him turning into like the free agency prize of this summer, which is wild to think based on where he was a year ago.
Go to the
And
Mavs.
exactly, that's what I'm wondering, which that seems like such a short-sighted move.
Yeah, it does.
And it could work out because, maybe Oladipo just continues to get back. And by the end of the season, we're talking like this guy's an all-star again. Like he's back to being his all-star form.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a good piece to add to that team. He's still only 29, or he's just going to be 29.
Mm-hmm.
But man, surrounding Luka with Porzingis and Oladipo going forward is just really scary to me.
That is not what I want. That's
Yeah,
this is like I don't know. That's why you don't give up on the tank early. That's why you don't pull the plug early whenever you find your young stud. Because I know, and like the Porzingis thing may end up working out, but he had injury problems in New York. I mean, that wasn't a mystery. I mean, that was a huge part of it, and that trade may end up just being fine anyways. But I don't know, man. They're locked in. They're kind of locked into who they've got, and they're going to have to. Donnie Nelson's going to have to get creative in order to get some good pieces around Luka. Oh man! So I'm at tankathon.com right now. If just by odds only, the Thunder have the fourth best odds in the draft, having Miami's pick. They have the ninth best odds with their own pick, and then Houston, with their win streak, has put themselves to the 18th pick in the draft, which happened very quickly. And it's just because you mentioned this earlier, like it's a very mediocre year for everybody. Like there's so many teams that have between 8 and 11 losses in the league. It's almost the entire
right.
NBA. And it does make these wins and losses even more heavy with regards to the Thunder's picks with Miami and OKC and Houston, that you go on a 6-game win streak and you think, oh my goodness, we're going to have, these two great lottery picks. Like, oh, well, we may have, a nice first round pick and the Thunder's lottery pick. That's
Right.
possible.
Yeah.
And who knows with Miami? I mean, they have not been able to get it together. And this is going to be, and I've said this on lots of shows, that like this is the sacrificial lamb season for the NBA. The NBA is just going to trudge forward to get this season over with, so next season can look as normal as possible. And there will be teams that will pay the price for that. And Miami just might be one of those teams. That just may happen, which is a bummer for Miami, who just made a finals appearance. But some team is going to come away from this season and feel like things were not fair or things weren't done correctly. But it's all just in the name of money and getting this league back on the schedule that they want it to be on.
And the good news for the Thunder is, unlike the Rockets pick, the Miami pick is completely unprotected.
It's completely unprotected.
What if Jimmy Butler gets hurt? Like, they've been terrible without him.
If Jimmy gets hurt and goes out for an extended period of time, yeah, they're screwed and they don't have their pick. That's where it could get pretty interesting for the Thunder. And I've honestly, I have dismissed those questions up to this point, and I'm still kind of dismissing it just because I believe that the Heat will get it together and that they'll at least be like the 7th seed or something like that,
right,
in the Eastern Conference. Because just like with the Rockets, it just takes get it going for 6 games, and then you're right where you want to be. I mean, that's all you have to do in order to get yourself in the right position, is just to have a good 6-game streak. Boom, you're there. And Houston's
Which,
likely
again,
going to win tonight, and it's going to put them. I mean, then they'll have the same record as Portland. I mean, it's crazy.
and that's really great for those teams like Sacramento or New Orleans who could still tell themselves, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
all we need is like 5-game run, and we're right back in this," which is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that is like so tempting the further we go into the season.
Oh yeah, you're in striking distance.
Right, forever.
Seriously, it's going to be until the end of the season that these teams can say like, I think that we can get there. 10th seed, like all we have to do is get to the 10th seed, and then we can tell ourselves we made the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be crazy. So James Anderson in the chat says Miami plays Washington and New York their next 4 games. So
well, now I was gonna be down on the Knicks, but now I'm back up on the Knicks. You know what? They're a strong team. They're building a good culture, good defensive mindset. I'll take them in that game.
I'll take that. Hey, Russ is back. It would be my declaration. Like Russ,
there we go.
He's back. So I'm not worried.
Sounds like 0-2. Sounds like 0-2 for the Heat. That's too bad.
Not worried about it. No. Anything else, Alex, before we go?
No, I mean, I thought that report about Bradley Beal was really interesting, just throwing cold water straight from the source on the idea that he wants out.
Yep.
That obviously just changes the landscape of the season, because I think if Brad Beal wanted out, he would obviously be the biggest prize that would be moved before the trade deadline.
Without a doubt.
And it seems like that's just not going to happen, that neither party is interested in, the Wizards or Beal. And
the Wizards in particular are just, there's just no way. Yeah.
Which would scare me, but they obviously feel good about it, because I mean, it's after next season that he could be a free agent, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, in the story, it's Beal has, told Fred, like Fred's done these exclusive interviews with him, that he's obsessed with the Mavericks 2011 title.
Yeah.
And that, like, I just want to be like, hey man, did you know that the franchise you're playing for hasn't won 50 games since the 1970s? Like
it's cool. Like, obviously we wish every player was like this, because it's really cool when you have a guy who wants to take that on the way that like Lillard did, or Lillard does in Portland, or Dirk did in Dallas. Mm-hmm. That is really cool, because there were moments last night watching that Nets against the Clippers, where like, yes, it was cool seeing so many stars on a team, but to go like multiple minutes without even noticing Kevin Durant was on the floor was such a weird experience.
I know.
Even more so than when he was on the Warriors, because he was still one of the 2 biggest offensive forces on that team.
Yeah.
Whereas on this team, like, he legitimately could be the 3rd option on offense.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's like, what are we doing? Like, how are we going to talk about this guy once he's retired? This is so weird. He's one of the best players of all time, and he's the 3rd option on a team. Like, what is happening?
Kevin has made some weird choices in his career, because he could be, I mean, like LeBron is going to challenge for like all-time scorer ever. Like Kevin should be the guy to do that. That should be Kevin's thing. Like, that's who he was built to be.
It should be like easy almost. It should be like, this should happen as long as he doesn't get injured.
Yes. And even after the injury, I mean, it is pretty wild. And he wants to win NBA titles. That's great. I think this Nets team has a shot. I was texting my friend Peter about it last night, that really all the Nets have to do is just get a few stops, because they're going to score enough points. And if they can just get a few stops at the end of the game, you can definitely win. That's what happened with the Clippers. They just got a few stops. They had a Reggie Jackson who, under no circumstances, should be shooting whenever he's playing with those guys, unless he's wide open under the basket. But he like took a pull-up 3, with a few minutes left in the game. And you're just like, man, what are you doing? Like, you can't waste possessions when you're playing the Nets, because they're just going to score, and they just are.
That's the thing for other teams like this. When you get to the crunch time, there's inevitably going to be a game where somebody that you don't really want taking a shot is going to have to take and make a shot. And I just don't think that's going to be the case with the Nets. Like, one of those three guys is going to be able to get a shot every single time in crunch time. There will not be any Robert Horry 3 for the Brooklyn Nets. Like, that will never have to really happen. Like, maybe Joe Harris could have that, but you don't need to do it.
Yeah, no, you don't need to. Maybe it's Jeff Green. I mean, that's what they were talking about this on the Basketball Buds pod for the Athletic NBA show on Monday, that the worst case scenario for a shot in crunch time for the Nets is a Jeff Green wide open corner 3.
Yeah.
That's the worst case scenario for a shot. Like, shit, man.
Jeff Green hit some game winners in OKC. What was that game that he hit? Was that the Golden State?
Yeah, against the Warriors.
And then he had the big remember the dunk against Atlanta?
Yeah.
I think it was on like MLK Day.
It was on MLK Day. Yep.
That was really cool.
Yep. Shout out to Jeff, who looked like he was on his way out of the league a year and a half ago.
Yeah, for sure. And even before that, when he had the heart condition, to be able to bounce back from that, he's had pretty awesome NBA career.
He has. And if you just, I mean, he was just miscast from the draft as to like what he could be. And then he's really honestly, he hadn't really settled in until he got to Houston. And then after he played in Houston last year, it's like, it's very clear what he is.
Yeah.
Which good for him, because, to extend your NBA career. And some of that is like relationships that he has. It's always good to have good relationships with people in any working environment. And I think Jeff obviously has that with the guys he played with in OKC, and they've taken care of him. But it was a good move for them too, because he still has a lot left to give, obviously.
Yeah. But going back to Beal, all this is to say that, like, yeah, it might seem weird from the outside as why Beal would want to stay there. But I do think in this current climate, it is admirable that he would be that open about what he wants to do. And you could say the same thing about Giannis staying in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we need to celebrate these guys, because if we don't, we're just going to get more of these teams like the Nets. And it's just going to be harder and harder for a team like an Oklahoma City to win a championship. Yeah. I mean, if there's going to be 3 superstar teams a year and they're basically locked into the 2 finals positions, it's going to be hard. The NBA is better when each team kind of has their star all trying to do that Dirk model.
Yeah, no doubt. They just need to have some success. And that's why people don't talk about like Lillard, because he's had a degree of success in Portland. And Beal just hadn't had that. And that's been the biggest problem. That's why everybody thinks that he's going to eventually want to leave, because they just have been atrocious. I mean, they've been very, very bad this year. They've been very, very bad last few years. That's why you're just like, oh, okay, this seems inevitable. But hopefully it's not. Hopefully he stays. Hopefully they can put a good team around him. Maybe they get a good pick in this draft and they're able to develop, I don't know, Jonathan Kuminga or somebody alongside him, and then he actually has a running mate. That would be great. That would be great for Washington. I think that would be a really good thing for that team. And they've also been ravaged by COVID. It's been a really awful situation for them. They haven't played a ton of games this year. They have missed a ton of guys when they have played. So, Denny Avdija could end up being a good player for them. There's still a lot of basketball to be played for Washington, but it's been brutal. It's been a brutal season for them so far. Any predictions for tonight, Alex?
Only prediction is that Top Shot will not be dropping a pack. I was up till midnight last night. Me and the L-Man were on the phone refreshing, F5ing, and nothing happened.
No.
And I'm anticipating that will be the same story tonight. Be another wasted night.
Are you predicting a big Dort game tonight?
No, I think we're in the Bays era now. I don't know how long it's going to last, but
Okay.
I'm anticipating another big Bays game.
Okay, big Bays night, which means bad Dort night. Hopefully they'll make the switch soon. So thanks so much for listening to our show. You can follow Alex on Twitter at AlBabyCakes. You can follow me on Twitter at Andrew K. Schlecht. Hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful Wednesday, and we'll talk to you guys again on Friday.